Hey everyone, welcome to Adobe Live. Thank you all so much for joining us today. My name is Cody and I will be your host for this stream. Today we are joined by the wonderful Bella Kotak. How are you doing today, Bella?
Hi, doing good, thank you.
Yeah, it's so great to have you on. I wanted to say hey to everyone in chat. Also, hey Wade, thank you so much for being our moderator today. Robert, Ted, Keys, thank you so much for streaming. Ted, earlier, I watched your stream, it was awesome. Check out the replay if you guys missed it. Um, well, as before we get started, I wanted to give it over to Bella. To just kind of give a little bit of an intro to who she is. She is an incredible photographer and compositor. I've seen her work, it's absolutely beautiful. So I'm looking forward to seeing the project that we work on today.
Oh, thank you so much, and thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, of course.
Yes. Hi everyone, I'm Bella Kotak, and I would say I'm a fine art fairy tale, floral loving photographer based both here in the US and in the UK. So let's dive in. I'll show you some of my work, and then I'll show you what we're going to be doing today. So these are some examples of my work. I like to shoot both on location and in the studio. And when I'm in the studio, I like to sort of bring a little bit more of an extra dynamic storytelling element using digital backdrops. So it's a really fun play for me because it means that I have to have a end vision in mind so that I know how to light my photograph as I go from the very beginning because I want to know, because I know in my head like what the end vision is. I am going to be compositing, so therefore the lighting has to match the background and so on and so forth. And it is a really great way, I feel, once I started embracing these sort of digital backdrops and seeing how the colors I can create with my studio photography allowed me to find like my style in that world, which was really fun and exciting and a whole new world opening experience for me. So I thought for today, I would show you guys perhaps ways that you could incorporate digital backdrops into your studio photography as a way to, tell more stories. And okay, so these are just a couple more images, examples. For example, a before and then the after. Right.
Wow, that's incredible.
Isn't it fun? So you can see how the studio has like the vision there. We've already got like drops on our eyes,
Mhm.
but then I elevated all using Photoshop and lots of tips and tricks in the background to like bring the idea that I have in my head to reality. All right, so let's dive into our Photoshop segment.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so we are going to be working on a couple of pictures today, and this is one of them. And I feel like we're going to end with this one because this one, um, just has like a lot of things that we're going to learn in the first one that we'll just apply. So we're going to start with this picture. So let's start with separating our subject from the background. How do we go about doing that?
Mhm.
So I would always recommend that when you're in a studio and you are lighting with knowing that you're adding a digital backdrop, ideally, if you can actually have examples of the digital backdrop that you want to use, that will really help you a lot with your lighting. So, for example, I already had examples for this picture, and the funny thing was, I didn't actually use it. I ended up going with a totally separate backdrop, but the lighting matched. And in that previous example, that backdrop had sunset lighting. I find that sunset lighting is sort of like a really easy way to uh for like I guess like the lighting style. It's like a really easy way because it's quite versatile as well. So, for example, this picture was shot with like one light on the side, with a gel, and then I had I think a V flat on the other side, sort of creating a nice contrast.
Yeah.
And now we're going to, and now we're going to separate it from the background. But actually, before I jump into that, I do think it's very important to shoot against a background that's very easy to separate your subject from.
Mm.
So we don't always have that luxury, but when you do, that's why I shot on blue. So I knew that I was going to separate her and I wanted as much contrast between my subject and the background so that when it comes to Photoshop, it just makes it a whole lot easier. So
Mhm.
for example, this is a blue backdrop. So we can do a couple of things here. So you can go into, okay, let's go ahead and just make that final, so like this is a select. So we're just going to duplicate it. Now we're going to go to filter. No, hang on a minute. We're going to go over here, select. So Photoshop has some things that are like a variety of ways to get to the same place. So color range is a really easy way. So if you are shooting with your subject contrasted against the background, color range is actually great because it means it will just grab that color. So in this case, we're going to grab just like making sure that the eyedropper tool is selected. You're just going to select anywhere on that blue. Now you have the plus and minus eyedroppers next to you. So I will just go ahead and select the plus and just select the rest of the blue gradients that have naturally fallen off where the lighting is. So here we are, we have an image on the side here which just sort of shows us what's selected. As you can see, what is marked in white is what's selected, what's marked in black is what's not selected. So it looks like color range on this particular image did a pretty good job. So I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. Oh, and also you can change the fuzziness too. And I would recommend that people play with this because it does impact the fluffiness of that edge and what it does and doesn't select. So it is really worth sort of going back and forth with that, I think, because once you nail this, it just makes like selecting a subject, what, a couple of clicks?
Wow.
Like
Yeah,
30
magic.
seconds and you're done. Yeah. So that's one way. So now I will go ahead and open up a layer mask and I'm going to invert my layer mask so that I see what's been selected and what hasn't. I'm going to also, with my, down here with my adjustments panel, click on solid color. So now I'm just going to pick something, you know, a bit neutral where I can really see what's happening. Maybe something up here in the gray. And just zoom on in. And as you can see, it did a pretty good job. Now, there is a lot of blue still left along the edges. I wouldn't worry about that at this stage. It's actually pretty okay to see that a lot of this hair sort of flicking, the natural flick, is still there. So it's not like a clean cut, which is, you know, also workable. And I'm going to show you how I would work around that. But it is nice to see that the hair is selected. And even though there is some blue and it is a bit messy, we can clean it. So that's just an example to show you how color range is quite effective, especially when you're shooting with your subject with a background that's different color. So, you know, in this case, blue, that's why people use green screens. So
Yeah.
that's just, yeah. It did a pretty good job over here on the basket. And overall, I actually think that's not bad. Obviously, I would go in my layer mask and just go ahead and just clean this all up from the edges. Now, let's have a look. Before we dive into, I'm just going to label this color range so that we can come back to it. I'm going to try and keep this organized. So that's our color range select. What is our next option of selecting? Well, let's have a look. Let's go up here. My next option is selecting the subject. So color Photoshop has, again, in the select panel, you can go down to select subject. And again, it does a pretty good job, I find. So our subject is selected over here. And if we go to the layer mask, I'll just open that up. We can see it actually did a much more nuanced select. So color range was, you know, it did pretty good, but I do think select subject better. And this is why I do recommend it's important to know all the different ways you can do it so that you can just go and compare and pick the one that's applicable for you and that will lead you to the least amount of work moving forward. So in this case, as we saw for the hair, it's fantastic. We're going to follow it down the body. And you see, it didn't do the best job on the bag. So whereas this did a pretty grand job, this didn't. But you know, you can just go ahead and I believe, I was like, oh, is there a way to copy that layer mask over? Sometimes there is. So you can sort of pick and choose how you want to do it. So for example, I could do a little cheeky trick here. And yes, and only like in this layer mask, like if I copy that layer over, and then in this layer mask, I could literally, oh, one moment, just check my flow is at 100. Oh, hang on, there we go. Like just, there we go. Like just delete everything else that I don't need. And eventually we will get to a place where once this is on, we've got that back while keeping the hair of the original, the other select, this one. This is the subject select layer. Sorry. Trying to keep organized while moving very fast with my brain
Yes.
is an experience, I have to say. All right. So, okay. Oh, and also because we did that, I can just go ahead and delete this layer, the mask here. So all I'm doing here is diving between the layer masks.
Right.
So I've kept the subject select because I liked, oh gosh, I liked what it did on the hair. And then I'm coloring away on the color range select because I liked how it had the bag. So using layer masks as well as a way to just sort of finesse and fast up your photo editing experience is definitely something that I do all the time. I just quickly bounce between trying to keep track of what adjustment was most effective for what.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, so then obviously the last way of separating the subject from the background is, which is what a lot of people actually do, is just use the pen tool. So I'm going to go up here and just call this pen tool select, pen tool separation, because that's what we're going to be using. The pen tool. Turn these off. And the pen tool is pretty effective, especially when it comes to the sort of longer aspects. So say, for example, you are not having the luxury of shooting on a blue backdrop and say you are shooting on location, which is what I do all the time. And actually, some of those examples that I showed you in my previous slide when I went through my work, I actually shot a few of those on location. They
Oh,
were not
wow.
shot,
Really?
yeah, they were not shot on, in fact, I'll put it up here. This one was not shot on in a studio. It was like this is
Wow.
daylight.
That's so impressive.
Yeah,
It's beautiful.
thank you. But there's actually like a woodland scene behind her. Like there's a bunch of
Wow.
trees, and I've edited those trees. But then I thought, as an experiment, as you know, I love to play with photos and pixels. I thought, let me see if I can separate her. So I did, and I used the pen tool. So she didn't separate so easily because it was just a lot of foliage and I was experimenting and playing. So this is where the pen tool does come in very helpful. So again, you want to go to the pen tool, which is over here somewhere. There we are. There we go. And obviously the pen tool has a bunch of other options as well, which I also highly recommend people just dive in and play with because you never know what you might find. And that's the beauty of Photoshop. Honestly, one of my favorite programs because there's just like 300 ways to get to the same place,
Yes, it's so true.
isn't it? So there's like, that is so freeing that there's no right or wrong way to do things. And that's why
Hmm.
when I was doing my like somewhat messy diving in and out of the layer masks, um, example of that, there's no right way. You just do what sort of makes sense to you. And
Yeah,
there's an option for it on here.
exactly.
Yeah, so here we go. So on this pen tool. You literally just, this is it. It's so simple. I just spend time quickly just using the Alt Option key on my keyboard and making big selects. And at this point, usually I would be a bit tidier, but obviously for demonstration purposes, I'm just being as messy as I can. And it really doesn't matter either, because I'll show you a couple of ways to get around it. Now, the pen tool isn't really great when it comes to having a lot of this like I guess here we've got tassel or some kind of a fringe, and then
Hmm.
when we get to the top, we've got the hair, and that's where I do believe the subject select is just thriving at. But say, for example, we do want to just go, oh gosh, I went the wrong way. Let's just delete that and come back up here. So say, for example, we do want to separate our subject using even her hair with the pen tool, and we're going to get a really sharp, hang on, let me just move this. There we go. We're going to get a really sharp line. And sometimes it is what it is, but I'm just going to move this around just as an example. Now, please don't judge me. This is purely for example purposes. Okay, so let's just like quickly go down here and just like select her head. Oh dear. Right. Okay.
Beautiful.
Hang on. People are going to be like, where is she going with this? And I'll let you know. I don't really know. But we can also feather the radius. So that's
Mhm.
an option too. I think in this case I'm not. I just want to show you something. Going to open it up. Yeah. Voila, here we have a beautiful floating head. So now with a layer mask, I'm just going to go ahead and like with my brush tool, just very lightly brush away this edge, just where that is. Now, what I'm going to do is you can actually go ahead and use the blur tool on this edge to sort of fluff it up a little bit more. And as you can see, it's already started to make a difference just by fluffing up with the blur tool. And in fact, if you do it with any of these, it's worth it as well. So whenever I do make any select, the next step for me is going in with the blur tool and I just go around the edge. So what that does is it just sort of, any of these, usually there's not that many sharp lines, but like sort of here, it just sort of like, I would say it just embeds her sort of more into the scene.
Right.
Um,
Softens it a little bit.
that's it. It's almost like the natural fall off softening of the camera when you're shooting
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, like that depth of field.
Yeah.
That's what that is. Um, so you can go ahead and do that. So with the pen tool, if we bounce back to that, another thing that I do like to do sometimes is if, for example, say here, we've got like a little bit of a gap. I haven't done a good job at this at all, but say over here, we've got that little bit of a gap. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll select, make sure that the little clip in between the layer and the adjustment, the layer mask, so a little clip between the layer and the layer mask is untoggled. I'll go to like the smudge tool and just sort of like smudge it in. Do you see?
Oh, yeah. That looks really nice.
And it does do a pretty effective job. Obviously, you'll have to take my word for it because this is the most horrific example I could have showed you for that particular.
It is not horrific at all.
Oh dear. But to show you like the difference. Oh, here we go. So you can smudge that layer mask so that it sort of fits in a bit more naturally. And it actually does a pretty good job as well. So if, especially with sort of like around the skin, I do find, but it's not doing a bad job with the hair too. It's just sort of like blending them in. So you see this sharp edge, it softens it up. And like,
Mhm.
where's another sharp edge? So over here. So it does a pretty good job of softening it. So again, if you are separating with the pen tool, because perhaps for some of you, if you're shooting on, like I said, on location or with a more complicated background that the Photoshop can't separate with the pre-tools that it has, like color range or select subject, then this is a really great way to get around, quickly select, and then go tidy up that layer mask using both the blur tool and the smudge tool. So those are my little like tips and tricks for that. Now we are on the hair, so let's stick with the hair and like, how do we integrate this hair into the scene? So as you saw, her hair had, if I take this off, a lot of these flyaways.
Mhm.
Now, a lot of us, when we are shot, when we're shot on location or in a studio and the light is catching it, it will catch those flyaways. And those flyaways are very natural. They're supposed to be there. And they just again show that scene exists. Like that's just
Yeah.
another example of showing that that moment is like a bit is real.
It's
And
real,
you'll see
yeah.
it with yeah, and you'll see it with artists as well. When artists are doing art pieces or illustrations, and if you ever watch like artist time lapses, which I love, where illustrators are just like drawing in those really like thin flyaways, like at the very end when they're doing all of those details and painters are just adding in that little like light sort of highlight
Mhm.
everywhere. So that's what we are going to do now in our version of it. So we're going to use, I would say, let's pick a good one that I think might be quite fun. Maybe not the color range example. Actually, honestly, I do think, funnily enough, this pen tool example is coming through.
See, it's great. It's not horrible at all. It's beautiful.
Okay, it's so horrible because we haven't zoomed out. Oh my goodness. Okay,
Best
let
work
me.
ever.
Thank you so much. This is the Edit with Bella, the unhinged version. So now we're going to add some flyaways. Now, how do we do that? So I'm going to make a new layer. I'm going to call it here flyaways because keep it nice and easy for everybody to keep track of where we are. Now, with the flyaways, I do like to use the brush tool, and there are many, many brush packs out there that have like sort of pre-made hair brushes, and
Mm.
that's all very exciting and very good. If, like me, you don't know where to start, and you just want to like experiment, then I would recommend trying this. It's very simple. It's in Photoshop and accessible to everybody. So we're going to go over here. We're making sure that our brush is selected. We're going to go to Window, scroll down to Brush Settings. Now over here in the brush settings, we have, let's see, I'm gonna put this down there. We have a bunch of options. Now, this is what my typical brush looks like. Actually, if I exit out of this, and it's probably very easy for me to show you what I'm actually using. So my brush is selected. I just use like a general brush. So it's just one of these general brushes. Soft round is what I usually go with. And then if I right, as you can see, its hardness is set at 0, and then my size goes up and down accordingly. So that's where we are. I'm going to go now to Window, back to Brush Settings, and I'm going to click on Shape Dynamics. I'm going to select Shape Dynamics and just make sure that it's ticked. So now that Shape Dynamics is selected, we can go ahead and change the fade of this brush. So for example, let's have a look. So we want to select, if the control is set off, for some people that's what it usually is, I'm going to go to fade, and then I'm going to change the fade to, let's see, 500 perhaps. And as you can see, the hang on, there we go. As you can see, the brush tapers off at the end. I was wondering what was happening there, but actually this is a really good point. So this is the size of my brush currently, and when you see the fade is set to like a particular number, 500, 1000, whatever, the taper doesn't show. So if it's not showing for you, then I would recommend minimizing your brush size. Now for this, I use keyboard shortcuts. So Photoshop's keyboard shortcuts for the brush tool are the two brackets on the right side of your keyboard. So I actually, on my keyboard, have changed the tools. I think I talked about this in a previous Photoshop Live, where I shared about how I did my own keyboard shortcuts. And this was
Nice.
inspired by this was inspired by my husband, actually, Pratik Nayak. He has lots of Photoshop tips as well.
Hmm.
But one of his tips that I've taken away with me, and it's on every computer like version of Photoshop that I have, is keyboard shortcuts. So I've moved my keyboard shortcuts for the brush tool over to the left side, to Q and W, because I don't really use what those are naturally assigned to. They work really great for me keeping my hand on that side of the keyboard. So
Mhm.
Q and W are where I increase my brush size and decrease my brush size. And then obviously I have S set for, like, S is naturally the stamp tool, zoom, which is Z. All of the main things are already like kept very neatly on one side of the keyboard. So right now I'm just literally hitting Q and W to make it bigger and smaller. And as the brush gets smaller, you can now see it tapers off and looks like a hair. So this literally looks like a hair follicle and a hair, you know what I mean. And the size of this is really fun because it means that you can now do a whole bunch of things, such as add eyelashes and add,
Oh.
yeah, I actually had a photo shoot recently where the girl had white hair, and I, I couldn't find my white mascara because, you're bringing everything to the photo shoot. And so I gave her white eyelashes, and it was very natural looking, and I was very impressed by that.
Very
And you can
fun.
very fun. Um, when you're working on other images and you just need to fill up the eyebrows a little bit more, you can just go ahead and do this and just select from there and add those eyebrows. We are going to use this to add those flyaways. So I'm going to go ahead and just show you an example of what it looks like. Now, as you can see, I've just left it selected at blue so we can really see what's happening. This brush is too thick. It doesn't match the width of the hair, so I'm going to just minimize it even more. This sort of looks close, but maybe not quite. I'll make it a tiny bit smaller. And I think that's actually as bad as we're going to get. I think this is sort of the same size as this hair, as you can see. Now, it is tapering at the end, and because she has long hair, 500 is actually pretty good. I don't think it's too bad. So you can sort of see it naturally tapering. If you want a little bit more, you can just change that to like a little bit less. You can change that to 300. And as you can see now, you can just sort of see it sort of feel it falling away and giving it that sort of very natural feeling. I think 400 is where we probably want to be at. Now, this is what I'm just going to do this in blue so people can really see, but this is like the kind of motion that I'll be doing. Now, when I'm doing this, it's not, and as you can see, the hair is starting from all sorts of different places. So it's going to be a bit tricky for my hand to like get the right curve. So now I'll just rotate my canvas. So I recommend that when you're making like these big sweeping movements, whether you're adding hair or even retouching, rotating the canvas does make it so much easier for your wrist. But it also makes it a lot easier for the control because you can, there's a, like this is so much more control than like that, you know, unless you've trained it. But for most of us, this movement comes a lot more naturally. And so to sort of work with it, I rotate my canvas accordingly. So now we're going to do this from the beginning. And here we go, hair flyaways. Always on a blank layer because it just keeps it a very non-destructive process and it also allows you to keep that file size small. Now, I'm just going to zoom on in, maybe not too much, but I think this is fine. Making sure that my eyedropper tool is selected. Now, my eyedropper tool is set to an average of a 5x5 average. Sometimes it's set to point example, but I'll be honest, more often than not, I'm either at 3x3 or 5x5, and I actually would say 95% of the time I'm at 5x5. And all that does is pretty much just use like the average of the 5 pixels around it. So I just feel like I just like the select it makes, and it feels more what is the word? Appropriate or natural?
I actually didn't know you could do that with the eyedropper tool. That's really interesting.
Yeah, so hang on, make sure that's selected again. Also, good point that you said that because actually I forgot to mention that my sample is set to current and below. So whenever you're editing on a blank layer and you're using something like the eyedropper tool, or you're using like the healing tool, or you're using the stamp tool, all of these things I use on a blank layer. Again, very non-destructive, keeps some file size small, and I can tweak it. Like I can overdraw, underdraw, use a layer mask, take it away, open up a new blank layer, draw over it. And it just allows me to just work very quickly, very easily, without like fearing about making a mistake, because you're gonna make a mistake. And that's normal. That's a part of the process. We just embrace all of the mistakes over here. Um, but anyway, I like to keep my select to current and below because I'm always working in a what's the word? Layered way. So I'm always like moving on up. And I hardly ever jump back and forth. And when I do, I'll know that if I need to sample that layer, I have that option. I never really sample all layers, only because again, if I'm going back and forth, it starts making things messy and things don't make sense. So when I'm working like step by step, it's always set on current and below. And that sample is really important because if you select or current layer, which is usually what it's set to, um, there's nothing to select. It's a blank layer. So you can't select a color. As you can see, this is just the same color. It doesn't know what to select. So current and below now selects all the colors from that layer, of everything below that layer. So now we have the whole range. So I'm just going to go ahead and start quickly selecting colors from the head, and just drawing these flyaways. Now I'm going to move this back and forth as I figure it out and just go very quickly. And again, it doesn't have to be perfect because like I said, you can delete these and tweak them accordingly, like in the layer mask. But the only thing that I'm paying attention to is making sure that I'm choosing the right color. So for example, over here, this area, I'm just selecting from this, what's it called? This bright tone, because that is literally where the light is hitting it. So you know that the light on those flyaways would be that tone. I'm selecting dark because that's what is naturally showing over here. This bright over here would just make no sense because no other color in that vicinity is showing that light. So that would help, make people think, oh, this isn't real. So you just want to stick to the color that you're sourcing the root of the hair from, is what I'm trying to say. And then I'll just move this back and forth and keep going. Now, as you're doing this, it is really important to see that where the start and the end are is looking very messy, but that's fine because right now we're just getting those sort of shapes in. This is also very uniform. So just now I went for a big one because I wanted to show you how strange that would look. So I'm not going in and doing like really big things. It just will look really messy, and that's not what we want. We just want to show that there is some hair there. And again, this is just us blending the head in with the background. So I'm going just maybe a little bit above it. Now, these longer pieces is where you want to change the size of this. So I'm going to move this to like maybe 700 because now the strands of hair are getting longer. So over here, where at the top of the head, it sort of made sense for it to be shorter because it's all sort of condensed up there. But now where we're getting to these longer strands, we want to have a longer line because now it feels more natural. And that tapered edge is so beautiful, as you can see. So we're just selecting and then just going for it. And honestly, this is really fun and really therapeutic because you're just sort of swishing around. You're just moving around, swishing around. If you can't really see the hair, that's fine. Don't be tempted to do what I just did and go for like a black because again, it don't make no sense. Don't forget that it will all blend in with the background that you're going to have. So this is just a quick example of like how that looks. Now, how do we marry it into the scene? So this hair, if I zoom out, and it is worth doing this, be sure to zoom out so you can see what you've done and what needs to be corrected. I haven't really moved the hair brushes to anywhere on her. It's literally just for the edges. I've let them swirl around naturally as a natural hair would. And I will, obviously if I'd selected more of her head, I would have selected a longer fade so that I could create more hair just coming down the edge. And also what happens is you can just create like a lovely like flicks at the end and almost create like a nice wind movement. And actually that's where a lot of brush, like the brushes that you buy, you can actually help you create that sort of extended hair effect, which is quite fun, I think. So definitely fun to explore and see if you like it. Now, let's clean this up. Now, I'm going to go ahead, make sure my brush is selected. I'm going to take this shape dynamics off because we don't need it. We've done it, it's done its purpose. The hair has been haired, and now we're going to blend it in. We're going to go to our favorite, this is honestly my favorite thing, layer masks. The most versatile thing in Photoshop are these layer masks. They just help you have such control, and it's fantastic. So making sure that my layer mask is selected and make sure that my brush tool is set to black. And the opacity and flow, I like to just leave my opacity at 100. So I know a lot of people who, when you're first starting at Photoshop, and I fell into this completely myself, is I would change the opacity and not the flow. So I would recommend, I would be like, oh, I don't really understand what flow is.
Yeah, exactly.
But I understand opacity. So let me quickly demonstrate for those of you who don't know the difference between opacity and flow. I'm not sure if I demonstrated this before, but it's always fun to know anyway. So this is just a quick blank layer. I'm just color toning it black for example purposes. So I'll just make my brush bigger. Now, with the difference between opacity and flow, like 100% opacity shows 100% of the color coming through. Here we go, change the hardness, now we know. There we go, right? Lovely, the edge is like just doing its thing. In fact, do you know what? No, actually, this is fine. I think this is a good example. Now, if I change the flow to like what I usually like, which is usually sitting at 2% or 9%. Oh, hang on a minute. I've got the little bar blocking me from like messing around with my flow. Here we go.
There you go.
There we go. There. So I'm not entirely sure what percent that is because there's a little bar blocking it, but we'll get the idea. So flow builds up to opacity in a much more nuanced way. So I would say that rather than changing the opacity, changing the flow. So here we go. Now I've got the opacity set to 40%, right? And I'm like building up the color with my opacity at 40%. And in fact, I'll change this to lower hardness. I think that, there we go. This gives a better sort of example. But now if I change my flow to a low flow, we're building up to opacity at a much more sort of gradual way. And these edges, like the difference between the edges are just like such a much more smoother transition. And I think that's pretty much it. Like, I'm not sure if I explained that very well, but there's a bunch of videos that do talk about the difference between opacity and flow, and I would highly recommend checking them out. But essentially, the goal here is to just build up with just more nuance, like if that's what you want. And so that's why I use a flow. It gives me that sort of nuance. So the flow, I'm setting it to sort of like 9%, making sure that my layer mask is selected, and just very gently, as you can see, lightly with my brush strokes, those edges of the hair are being blended into her head and like into the scene. So this blend is what's going to start helping it, like embedding that hair into the scene and making it look so natural. You can use this hair. Right now we're using it for flyaways, but this hair technique, like I said before, you can literally use it for eyelashes, eyebrows. It'd be the same thing. You just go in, brush it roughly where it needs to be, open up a layer mask, and then with your flow set to low, maybe like 7 to 9%, just start brushing away and blending those edges into the scene. And voila, we've got some hair. Flyaways. Now, the difference here is that these are sort of quite sharp. They're not really doing the same as the hair that it was sourced from, which is quite blurry. So I would recommend in this case, either using the blur tool, which you can select if you make sure that your layer now is selected. You can go in with the blur tool and you can change the strength of your blur tool. Like a lot of people don't do this because, you know, you just grab the blur tool, you just go to work. But you can actually just change the strength of it, and this just gives you a little bit more control to that. So I'll just go ahead and bring this down. There we go. And blur this a little bit. And as you can see, I'm trying to match the blur of the hair that we've drawn to the hair that's already there. So this wants to match the depth of field that we have. And just like that, we have hair, like a very natural looking hair flyaway situation. And now this is going to work with us to embed her into the scene even better. So I'm going to zoom out.
Wow,
And
that
here we
looks
are.
great. That looks
Doesn't
so
it?
good. That's
Especially
amazing.
this
Just,
side. This side's a bit,
yeah,
you know,
using
yeah.
those really simple tools, I mean, it looks so natural, especially after you zoom out. Like, you would never guess that they were actually digital strokes after, especially after the blur and everything. Like, it looks great.
Yeah. And if you don't want to like, if say you've drawn like loads and you cannot be bothered to like go in with the blur tool, you're like, oh my God, uh, just go to filter Gaussian blur.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah. So what I would do if you're going to do that is just duplicate that layer, and then you've got your original brush strokes. Now whatever you do, you're not too scared. Like you've got those, they're safe. Duplicate it, then go to blur, Gaussian blur, and then just set like a low radius, and it will do the same thing. And that just applies it on like a more universal effect. And I think that's also just as effective. Okay, so now also that the reason and I think I'll just take that off. Say so you've done this and you think, oh, it's not really standing out, then just do what I just did again, which is just duplicate the layer, and then you can just change the opacity of that as well. So you've got more control as well. And I think that looks more natural. Now let's get to the fun part. Let's add that digital backdrop. How do we do that? Now we've done a lot of like separating a subject. I've covered how we use different tools such as select color range, select subject, how I use the pen tool in a really creative way, how we amended the layer mask using when you know, some tools that we have. So making sure that if you want to amend the layer mask, declip it from its layer, and use a blur tool, use a smudge tool to just sort of get that sort of finish. I like the blur tool on the layer mask because that does, I feel like, just really clean, take away that straight line and like match the depth of field. Now we've added hair. So let's get to work. A subject to select. I'm going to go with the subject select because I feel like that was really good. I'm just going to do a very quick, since we've got the pen tool select already for the hair, I might just go into my layer mask and using the black tool, just get rid of it. just keep our pen tool select for this part. I'll just hang on. There we go. Something like that. Our pen tool is there. So, okay. I feel like we're sort of there. Like that. There we go. That will do for now. Let's just ignore what's happening here. Oh, that's the pen tool. So I'll just go ahead and do it. There
At
we
least
go.
she has a body again.
She has a body. She has like several selects on her now. We just gone ahead and like amended the three things to create something. If you're still following along, like, well done. Okay, here we are. There we go. And actually, this color range, I'll just quickly tidy up this back. So color range did a pretty good job, I must say, when it came to sort of this sort of background. I think my favorite out of all of them has to be the subject select. I think that was pretty effective. Okay, so now our subject has been selected. We've done all the hard work. I'm going to turn off this color fill and now add my backdrops. I have a few backdrops that I've already brought into this Photoshop file. So we're just going to go ahead and select them and close this. So I already did like a final piece before, and that was a quick little teaser. Now we have our backdrop. So usually when you throw a backdrop in, oh, let me tell you a little bit something about this backdrop. So I have a little store and I sell digital backdrops, I sell Photoshop actions, and anything to make my creative process easy and effective. I thought I would love to offer that to others to make their creative process easy and effective as possible. So you know how I told you that the sunset light is like quite versatile depending on the type of photography that you do and the type of backgrounds that you're drawn to. So in my case, I'm very much drawn to like that fine art aesthetic, and that usually has that Caravaggio style lighting. And so that's why when I do my lighting, I try and keep that in mind, that sort of more contrasty, warm light aesthetic. So I have a few backdrops that could sort of fill the same bill. Because it's so versatile, the lighting allows me to decide where I want to go with this picture. So this is from a collection that I have called Haven, and here we have a scene that's very much set in like a city, and it kind of works because she looks like a bit of a traveler. And again, the backgrounds are there to sort of add another storytelling element. Here she looks like a traveler on the road. So it just depends what you want. Here she looks like she's just hanging out at her friend's mansion, like
in a garden.
Exactly, in a garden. She's part of a scene. And so and yeah, and here we have her sort of just maybe enjoying the sunset, like I'm not a viewpoint. Here we go. So the thing that all of these backdrops have in common is that the lighting is sort of the same. So the lighting is warm and it's come from the side, and that's why it matches with this scene. I've also already sort of changed the, what do you call it? Like the side. So for example, this, if I flip it, you'll see that now the lighting doesn't match. So it's very important to take that into account because you don't want to put a backdrop into a scene that has a different lighting to the subject, because you're going to be like, oh, something don't make sense. So here we go. Make sure that the lighting on the background is going in the same direction as the lighting on your subject, and that will help it feel more real. Now, let's go ahead and pick our backdrop. Cody, which one do you like? We'll go with whichever you want.
Oh,
what are you feeling?
I think I like the Olympia one.
Ooh, okay. Let's go with Olympia. I liked it too, to be fair. I felt like it suited it very nicely. Oh, okay. Gosh, we haven't finished prepping our subject. I just thought about it because, as you can see, there's like still a lot of blue, and we
Mm,
never really addressed that. So let's go ahead and address it. Now, we've picked Olympia, um, but before cleaning our subject, since we're on the backdrop topic, let's just finish this and then we'll dive into that. So we've brought our backdrop in, we like it. How do we make it look real? Now, there's a few things that I do recommend people do. So the first thing is, again, these are all just my personal opinion. This is your work, your aesthetic. So just take everything that I say with a pinch of salt and do what feels right for you and honors your vision. Um, so I like to blur it a little bit in the background because again of the natural fall off of that depth of field. So we already see that there's depth of field in her hair and on her dress and her outfit. So I will just sort of use that as a guide for how much I want to blur it. So for blurring, there's a couple of ways. One is a Gaussian blur, which is pretty much what most people do. And I would say generally it does a pretty good job. So Gaussian blur is pretty grand. You don't want to go like crazy blurry with it because now you've like lost all context. Um, but something like 5 or 6 or 7 is just like it shows the detail, but it doesn't like it's not sharp, you know.
hmm
To be fair, this background has already been like pre-blurred because of that. But if it was like super sharp, it just wouldn't make sense because obviously the subject has a fall off and then the background is suddenly sharp. So have a think about that. If you like a sharp background, then take that into account with the lighting that you're using and the settings that you're shooting the picture in with, so that everything in your scene is sharp, so that then your sharp background connects and they blend in with the scene more effectively. In this case, I'll just blur it like a tad because, we've already got the blur going. Another blur is if you go to filter, blur, lens blur. I actually really like lens blur. I use lens blur mostly when I'm like wanting to blur something on location. Because I feel like lens blur, when it comes to like embedding what I want to blur into a location, with all of those other elements, feels very naturalistic, like much more than the Gaussian blur. And again, that's just a personal preference. But I use both interjectively to depending on what I need to blur. So then the next thing is the how much the background is standing out from the subject. So now I know that I want, sorry, my finger slipped on the mouse. Um, woo. I know that I want the subject to stand out more than the background. And right now I feel that the background is competing with me. So what would we do when we're not like, what would we do? We would darken it,
Darken.
which is usually what happens to when you're shooting naturally anyway. The light is falling on the subject, so the background naturally becomes darker. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to go to my adjustment panel, I'm going to go to brightness and contrast, and just reduce the brightness a tad. So maybe something like here, and you can already see it's
Mm,
starting to get like moody, aesthetic. Um, I also think Olympia works really well with this scene because it already has a lot of the colors that she naturally has on her skin tone.
hmm
Um, this hasn't been color toned yet, so this is literally how it is with the makeup and the lighting. So maybe that's why you were drawn to it, Cody.
Maybe.
Yeah. So we're just going to go ahead and reduce the brightness, and you can also play around here with the contrast if you want as well. Um, I usually don't really touch the contrast, but I will see what's there. Okay, so now you can see that started to embed her a bit more. Now, if you're shooting on a studio, in a studio, there would be, and the light is coming quite dramatically from one side, there would be a shadow. So let's add a shadow. I like to add my shadow just going to the curves panel and dragging the middle pointer down and just, a little bit and turning that off and on. Right. Making sure that my layer mask is selected, I'm going to go ahead and invert that layer mask. So now it's hiding everything that um, I've, it's doing. And now we're going to bring it back in its like in a considered position, which is behind her. So the lighting is coming from this side. So I guess a shadow would be falling on this side. And just adding that shadow a little bit really like sets her in it. I always
hmm
find. So this same technique will work for pretty much any backdrop that you do. So if I turn this off and on, you can see it's quite dramatic. And if you don't like it, reduce the opacity. So now this is like a 50% opacity. And I think that's a bit more of a soft nuance thing. With Photoshop, what I always try to do is make lots of little changes that don't really feel noticeable. You notice that, but actually that is the beauty of it. Like when you get to the final piece with all of these like teeny tiny little things and nuances and changes that you've added, they do come together to create a really rich depth of impactful choices. And that people can't really tell what has been done, what hasn't been done. And isn't that just really fun? Okay, so here we go. She's like, to me now, I feel like she's sort of like embedded a bit more into that scene. Now, that's how I would bring in a digital backdrop. Now, I did talk to you a little bit about the hair and how, as we can see, we can still see a lot of that blue. How would we go about like getting rid of it? Because, it doesn't really look very good. Now, because of, the very messy way that I've gone ahead and done this, I'm going to go ahead and just group them and just call that group subject. And now let's see if this little trick works on this group. I let's see. Yeah, I think this is a fun one. We're going to open up a new layer. I'm going to call it color. And that was literally just hiding new layer and then labeling it color. Now over here in the drop down menu, I'm going to go ahead and set that to a color blend mode. So now that that's set to color blend mode, blank layer, I'm going to clip that using the option tool, hovering between the layers. I'm going to clip it. And here we are. It's now clipped to our subject. Now, anything that I brush on this color layer is only going to affect my subject. It's not going to affect the background or anything. Like that's how these clipping tools work. They just clip it. Any adjustment you make works only on the layer that it's clipped to. And once you get the hang of that, it's pretty powerful. Not gonna lie. So here we are. Going to set my flow to low. I usually like to leave my flow to around 9%. And I'm going to change my brush tool accordingly. So just something like this. Select and start brushing. Now, as you can see, I'm just selecting from the hair and I'm just lightly brushing. And all of that blue is slowly but surely melting away.
That's so cool.
Isn't it fun? And okay, so now say for example you go OTT and oh my Lord, it's spilled. That color has spilled somewhere else. Well, guess what? Our friendly pal, the layer mask, is right there. You can open it up, set your brush to black, and just clean up those edges as you go. So you can pretty much just be like, you can work fast and just tidy up as you go, and there's like no pressure. So just make sure that you're on the right layer though. So now my layer is selected, hitting the eyedropper tool. And the eyedropper tool is the option. Like when you hold down option, it like shows it. So you don't have to keep going here and back. For those of you who are starting out, I would just brush tool is selected, use option to select, and then just brush lightly. Okay. And then you're literally just going back and forth, and voila, our blue has disappeared. As you can see, there's like a chunk over here. You can go ahead and like tidy that up in the layer mask of that layer. I mean, I would probably have tested that theory if I, was taking my time doing this, just to see if it was possible. Otherwise, what you could also do is like a very sneaky select from the background. Like just select that dark color from the background and just sort of hide it in there. Like, how are they going to know? How would they know? So just go ahead, select in color, and voila, the blue has been browned. Okay. Any of these edges, I'm just going to select from the what do you call it? The fabric, because obviously that's the edge that we want. And just very lightly, boom, 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 brush it. And you see over here, it's not quite like it's not quite, what's the word? Like the layer mask hasn't quite like got it. Then because we're working non-destructively, all you need to do is go to where that layer mask is and try those little tips that I shared, which was unclip it, make sure the layer mask is selected. Go to the blur or the smudge tool in this case, and just see if there's like something there. I'm not entirely sure which layer mask it was on, by the way, but you can like play, like go back and forth because we are working non-destructively for a reason, so that you can go back and forth. Right. Let's stay on track and very quickly brush away. Now, you get the idea. Imagine that I've done that across the scene. And voila, just like that, she's embedded into the scene. The flyaways are still flying away, but if you do want to see more of them, obviously you can just duplicate that layer, change the opacity, and I'll zoom out a little bit more. And here she is in her scene.
That looks great. Fantastic job.
Yeah, thank you. We took our time because I was showing you like a lot of different ways that we can do it. But once you have like your plan of action, you're set. You see all this blue over here? It's exactly the same. It's the layer is selected and you would just brush and that blue just completely goes away. So keep an eye as you're working on a picture and work systematically. Because again, when you're doing that, there's like, if I find that if I try to leave things till later, I forget, and then I have to go back hunting in the layer mask. It's very frustrating. So if you're going to do a task, like just, go for it fully and then move on to the next one. So that's how I like to work. Right, so that's all done and pretty much dusted. We're good. Now we're going to dive into a couple of other little things. So let's talk about, oh, what happened? Where did that blue come back from? What did I do? I think something there, it moved. We're good. We'll just go back a few steps. We're good. Okay.
I hate to interrupt you, but we actually have a question from chat.
Oh yeah.
Umcorn in chat is wondering if you have tried any of the new beta features yet, for working with your photos at all.
Ooh, are you talking about Generative?
Yeah.
Or yes, I have actually. So for this particular image, this was the image that I wanted to do a lot of the Gen fill stuff on because it's really
okay.
fun.
Very nice.
Yeah. So I think let's wrap this up and then we can like dive into this one and then do all of the Gen fill fun things.
Cool.
Okay.
We have about like 20-ish minutes left.
Okay, great. I'm so glad that you mentioned it because now we know we gotta hurry it up.
Yeah, I also want to say that there were multiple people in chat that say your voice is very soothing to listen to, so you're doing a great job.
Thank you. I hope I'm not putting you to sleep. Okay, so then the last step for this is color grading. Now, actually, do you know what? We can talk about the color grading on this picture. So actually, do you know what? Since we want to dive into Genfil and there is a limited amount of time, let's just go ahead and do it. I'm going to wrap this up. If there's anybody who has any more questions about how to bring a digital backdrop into a studio image and you have just a few more questions, feel free to like leave them in the comments. Otherwise, if you want to ask me directly, then you'll find me on Instagram and just at Bella Kotak. So please go ahead and just, send me a DM there. But let's dive into the nitty-gritty of Genfil.
Woohoo!
Okay, so this is a picture that I captured on location. I like it, but I feel like it could do with some extra tweaking. Now, yes, I have definitely been playing with Genfil because honestly, how could you not?
Yeah.
It's like perfect for people who just want to play and explore with their imaginations. Now, it's because it is still, in its very early days, it's still learning and growing, so it doesn't always get it right, but we're on the right track, I believe. And plus, it's, when it does get it right, it hits a sweet spot.
Yeah.
So, for example, right? So, for example, if I was editing this by myself before Genfil, I would be cleaning up this background. So I would probably be getting rid of this tree. There's like a little a conservatory. We call them conservatories or greenhouse. I think this is a greenhouse actually. Over here, it's not really fitting our fairy tale aesthetic. And then also, even though, and then that would be like its own scene. Like I might add a dramatic sky or like some more trees or whatever. As I was playing with this, I thought, let me explore and see what's hiding in Genfil. So I selected it. Now this file, just to give you some context, it's not a small file. This file is like 11 1,000 pixels on
Oh my
the
gosh.
long
It's
on
huge.
the on the long edge. It's captured with the phase one medium format. And the reason for that is because I wanted to zoom in and show you like some gentle stuff on her face. And like this is why you would work with medium format. Like look at this file, look how far away I've shot it. Now when I zoom on in, she is like, like the detail is still there and it's
So
really
much
amazing.
detail.
So much detail. It's really fun. Um, and so that's like the appeal of that. Now, gentle on a file this big has to be sort of used very consciously because I feel like I think I read somewhere that gentle sweet spot is like 20, 10, 24 pixels
Mm.
on the long edge. So if you're going to be gen filling, you do want your pixels to be like 10, 24, whatever that looks like. And then that's like its sweet spot. But because we're doing such a big file, I'm being very conscious about where I'm going to be using it. And I know that I want to get rid of this background by the hedge. So this is where I would naturally be using gen fill over here. So we're going to do it together. Select it, right click, hit on generative fill. And now you can just type in a variety of things. So sometimes what I like to do is leave it blank and hit generate and see what happens. We could literally type in, like, I don't know, extend hedges, but I feel like that would be like quite boring. We could add castle if we wanted to and see what it generated. And actually, if you are in the comments, then please go ahead and like suggest what you want to see generated because oh yeah, that might be quite a fun little experiment for us. And actually, you can generate whatever across this image. We can play together. So the castle will show us a few options. As you can see, it's fun, it's interesting, but it's not really working with like the vision that I have. And I feel like it's also almost distracting from the composition
Mhm.
that I have in this particular picture. We could say extend hedges, but you know, let's see what happens there. I did one yesterday, so I'm going to see if that comes through today. So for anybody who it does follow me on Instagram, I did share like what had happened. I worked. Oh, well, this is fascinating.
That's
Why do
interesting.
isn't it? And so this is why it's fun to play in this because even if you're not going to go in this direction, it is fascinating to see what it pulls up in case you do want to follow a particular direction with more nuance. So this is cool. I do like the way it leveled at the hedge, but I'm not really into like this hedge at the top over here. I'm going
Mhm.
to add woodland because I'm curious to see what it would generate there. And then now, because this is such a large file, when we zoom in, you're going to see the generative like crack a bit.
Mm.
Because like I said, its sweet spot is 1028 pixels. This is not that. You're going to see like a lot more noise, a lot more pixelated. So we're just going to move this back and forth. Do you know what? It's not bad. So, like, actually, I kind of like it. It looks really weird and wonderful. And I feel like
Yeah.
if we had more time, I might stay here more. But Bonnie, should we leave this one? Because it does look a bit weird. No, no, no. Let's stick with that. We're going to keep our focus on the maze. I feel like, again, this is an example. If you have something too dramatic here, it takes away from somewhere else on the picture.
Right.
So always try and remember where is your focus? Because even though this is like tickling something in my brain, I feel like it's breaking the focus of how I'm experiencing this picture. I want something that the focus is here. This is just setting up the scene for that focus, complementing it, one might say, not working against it.
Mhm.
So pretty good enough. We're going to use it. Now, when I zoom on in, you can see that if I turn this off and on, this is the line over here. Like we can see it's a line because that's where the crown is smudging as well. That's a good indicator. And there's just a sharp difference in quality. Now, it depends on what you're using your images for. So a lot of people, they're just editing their images and they pretty much just live on the internet. They live on their website, they live on social media. They're not going to be living on a lot of pictures don't get printed is what I'm trying to say. But if you are
Mhm.
printing, this is what you want to keep in mind because you're going to see this difference in quality. Um, for this scene, using gentle on the back did make sense because I can now go ahead and blur it. I can take away some of that
Um,
edge. Yes. So I'm just going to unclip it because oh no, I'll leave it clipped, it doesn't matter. I'm going to just make sure my layer mask is selected and I'm going to change this word from castle to woodland. And we're going to go to filter Gaussian blur or filter blur at lens. Oh, it doesn't want to do lens blur, sorry. Gaussian blur it is. So we're going to blur it. And what this does is because it's in the background, because there's already a natural blur happening with the fall off of the camera and the depth of field, this now works as a generated element because we can like we're just using it, blurring it, and what do you call it? Making it more aligned with like the pixel quality of the original
Right.
and the generation.
Like
Yes,
blending it in with the background.
that's exactly right. So
Yeah.
you don't need like a crazy radius. Just go back and forth until you find something that works. I think 3.9 is like working so far. And then another thing you can do to also blend it again even more is go to noise, like add a bit of noise. So that's again just like filter, come down to noise, go to add noise. I do like to add a bit of noise because actually what I feel like it, because when you, again, it depends on the camera that you're using. So medium format does have a bit of grittiness to it, which is the quality of these files. It has like something. Um, so it made sense to add a bit of noise because that again will like now make the generation a bit grittier as well.
Hmm.
So this, as you can see, is far too much. So that's just an example of what the noise is looking like. And I'm just sort of going to lightly, maybe like, yeah, 2 or 3. 3 is what I'm going to leave it as. And there we go. Now so notice the crown is disappeared. So I'm just going to go ahead and bring that back. There we go. Here she is. And voila. So this is a good example of it. Now, Generative also does really well when it comes to sort of like mirroring elements in that scene. So for example, over here, we've got blue flowers. We're going to open up another layer, another blank layer. I'm just going to use the marquee tool. So like these blue flowers, and I feel like on this picture, it makes sense to like have that blue sort of somewhere else to sort of play with this sort of symmetry. I personally believe I would generative fill a little bit more with that background now that I know that this is the aesthetic that I want. I'll just keep hitting generation after generation until I get somewhere that I really like.
Hmm.
And it's really fun. Now I'm going to just select and add some blue flowers here and let's see if this works out. I'm going to generative fill and we're going to go to just type in blue flowers. Now I wonder if it's because there's already something blue on that's in the picture, and I wonder if that's how it works in the back end. But let's see if it does a good job of mirroring that element. Well, it didn't do a bad job. You
Yeah.
see?
That's
It's
pretty
sort of,
close. Yeah.
it is. And I did say blue. And so we can just like, let's see, that actually does look pretty good. And I
Hmm.
can go ahead and just change the opacity of that. And now you can see we're a lot closer to
Yeah.
the sort of color palette. Or even what I could even do is clip a like one of so these are all color adjustments. They all live in the layers panel and they're very, very fun. So you can even just go to like I guess a hue saturation and just clip it to that layer and then just go to like a blue or a cyan and bring that saturation down and this will now marry it. Like you're
Oh,
trying to
yeah.
get this, yeah, this color similar to that. You can reduce the lightness and brightness, so just bring that down a bit. And we're kind of getting there, but just like tweak it, and voila. Honestly, not bad.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah,
Looks pretty good.
pretty good. I think so too. Okay, so there we have it. That's one, like, those are two ways that I would use generative fill. Usually, like an element in the background, but that I can blur and add noise to. Now, how can you use it on, the face? Yesterday. Listen, I was curious. So I thought, can it do anything for expressions? And
Oh.
uh, and it kind of, I was like doing it as a joke. Like my husband and I were just sitting there going, ha ha ha. But we should show like the bloopers, like it won't do something, and then it's sort of, well, we'll see what happened. I thought it'd be interesting because this is it. You want to push it, you want to play with it because you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
Um, and so we're going to select the eyes and go to generative fill and click on like, I don't know. open eyes. What do you think, Cody? Do you think
Oh,
it's going
I
to do
don't
it?
know. I don't know what's gonna happen.
Cody, don't be scared. It might, but maybe do be a little bit scared. What is that? Okay.
They put glasses
Well,
on her.
well, I mean, it did
Now
open
she's
her
rolling
eyes.
her eyes.
She's really not into this. She's
She's
like,
waiting
really,
for her
Bella?
tea in the garden.
She's like, really? You wanted me to open my eyes? Okay. Um, but you guys, don't forget we're right at the very beginning. So,
Hmm.
okay, it did a really bad job. Would it make sense if I say like eyes open? I don't know, but let's see. But yesterday it did open her eyes a little bit and it was a little bit janky, but the fact that it did made me think, oh my goodness, where are we going with this technology?
Yeah,
Because this
absolutely.
is right, like this is just the beginning. So soon, yeah, if you do have an image or a select where her eyes are closed because she was mid-blink and but you love that
Yeah,
picture, you love the energy, the vibrancy of that picture. I think we'll probably get to a place in the future you can just like zoop, open her eyes,
definitely. Yeah.
right?
So
And
helpful for photographers specifically. Yeah.
yeah, for this very I think that expression nails it. That's my favorite. Oh my God. Okay, so now this leads us to the next thing that I like to use, which is the remove tool. So this is another application that's like been introduced, and a lot of people are still not using it. They're still sticking to like um, because of we're used to it, and myself included, which is this spot healing and the stamp tool, particularly if you're a photographer or a retoucher. Now the remove tool lives in the same place. So let's go ahead and find it. It's where the spot healing brush tool is right underneath it. Now the remove tool also uses AI when it comes to doing what it does best, which is removing things. Now, now why would you use a remove tool and not the generative fill? So for example, let's experiment. I want to go ahead, I mean, you sort of use both to be fair, but let's see what generative fill does here. So we've got all these flyaways, right? They're a little bit too much, and especially on her face, but we'll just use this as an example. And select it, go to generative fill, and just go to remove flyaways. Sometimes I would say for me, what holds me back from doing this is because I think, like we saw with Jennifer, you're not going to be sure what you're going to get. And I don't have time to be sitting around just generating.
Hmm.
You see, like
Oh, interesting.
it had, yeah, it took its own interpretation to what that looks like. But I want to still honor the integrity of what originally was there. I just want to remove the flyway. So this is why I wouldn't use generative fill in this instance because, yes, the flyaways are gone, but I mean, it's just looking a bit strange. So has like her, what's it called, hairline. Okay, so that's where it just doesn't really work well yet. Whether that can be nuanced, I'm not sure, but I don't know if that's what generative fill is for. That's why the remove tool exists. And so here we are going to zoom on in. I'm going to grab my wee little pen and select where are we? There we go. As you see, I've got my spot healing brush tool with a shortcut A. Because I click on that, I need to find a nice shortcut on my keyboard for the remove tool and
Hmm.
allocate it. So then I have easy access. Okay, so the remove tool uses AI to sort of make its decisions on how it works on the image. So for example, I would on this in the past use a spot healing tool, and actually we'll go ahead and just do a demonstration. It's the best way to do it. I like the spot healing tool. I think it does a pretty good job. But as you can see, just with that one line, we have a line. I'm going to turn
Hmm.
this off and on. So on the left here is a remove tool. And as you see, the edges are blended in to the scene. But the spot healing tool still has a bit of messiness on the scene. And this isn't all the time, but now and then that banding is really frustrating. I can see it, and you might be able to see it too.
Hmm.
It shows up now and then, especially when there's just a lot of information around it. You see the banding on the spot healing is just not like serving. So we're going to just open up a new layer. And then with the remove tool, that exact same is gone.
Wow, that's incredible.
Exactly. Yes. So it really is very clever with how it uses AI to um, analyze the pixels around it and then apply them in a very naturalistic way. And so I do feel in a sense it is like it yeah, it is just very it is like the spot healing tool, but with just more nuance
Hmm.
and information. There you go. I think information. And as
I'm
you can
gonna
see,
start
there's
using
no
that.
you have to. It's changed the game for me. So particularly over here, like now we're on the face. You can see that the wind was just winding that day. And in the past, I would have been utterly terrified to go into this with the spot healing tool. Could you be like
Oh,
spot healing on one hand, stamp tool on the other, your
yeah.
sanity on the floor, like
Sitting there for 3 hours.
just like, oh my God, this is my like why like what choices have I made in my life that led me to this moment in time? Like cursing past Bella. But oh my God, with the remove tool, everybody, photographers, like whoever you are, who just
Wow.
hobbyists, whoever, our prayers have been answered by the Photoshop gods.
It just went over
Also
the
yours.
eye. Like the eyelashes look perfect. I mean, it didn't affect it at all. That's
No, you
amazing.
see, so it still has the detail. It has like a bit of noise. It's kept the texture is what I'm trying to say, I guess, with that. It's kept the texture. Um, there's no banding that you would have. So here we go. I'll just switch it over to 8, so the spot healing. Even if I like reduce the brush size, there's like
Hmm.
there's a line there.
It's
There, you
like
see that line?
blurry. Yeah. Hmm.
Yes. And so now if I move to the remove tool, there's no line like here. Now, the difference between see, like there's you if you're editing pictures, get on that remove tool, it will change the game, I promise. Um, so what I would recommend though with hang on a minute, what is happening? Yeah. What I would recommend is just taking into account like time. So for example, the spot healing tool is faster. So when applicable, it does just work faster. The remove tool is slower, but it's because it's also analyzing a lot as it goes. So just
Hmm.
be cautious of like what your pace is and where you're using it. So in some cases, I do still use the spot healing tool because I don't see the banding in it there, and it's not showing up there anyway. So like on the hair, sometimes over here, spot healing does a really great job, and I just stick with it because
Hmm.
time is, limited. But yeah, remove tool, fantastic for hair, fantastic for flyaways. How does it work on like bigger things? So like these splodges, I would say arguably it does really well. So
Wow.
there you go. Like there are a variety. Does it do well on edges? That was another thing that I was very
Mm.
curious about because the stamp tool does do really good on edges. I would say the remove tool so far, actually, that was not bad. Well, you see, I'm not sure. So
It kind of removed a little bit of the corner there.
it did. It did remove the corner, and then also it added like some kind of its own like weird something strange is happening over here. So would I use it on that corner? I'm not sure. I would probably go ahead and use. Let's see. Let's go back. What the spot healing does that because I think that might actually do a slight better job. You see?
Hmm.
So I like if I do that. So I would say there, spot healing protected the integrity of those pixels more than the remove tool. So that's why I always say they're interchangeable.
Yeah.
So where one fails, the other one might be able to catch it. See, like even over
Hmm.
here, I would say the remove tool on the edges of particular like this sharp edge between contrast. Um, I wouldn't say it's the strongest suit, but again, it's fine. We have like a variety of ways to get around it. So jump in, explore with both the Generative and the remove tool and see how far you get. Let's see. Do we have any other questions, by the way,
Not
for this
currently, I
session?
don't think.
Okay. So now, I think, oh, there was something I did want to show, which was quite like,
We have about
uh,
like 5 minutes left, so one
okay,
last thing.
brilliant. So I thought I'd show you this because again, we were just doing a little experimentation because we wanted to see what we could um, offer to people as options for Adobe Live to make it like entertaining. So I'm going to go ahead and just quickly resize this picture to, I don't know, let's just say 300, 3000 height. Um, out of curiosity now, guys, this is an experiment, so we're going to do it together. Uh, I'm going to just I'm going to do a stamp layer. And so here we go. That's that. I'm going to go to this image. I'm going to change
Oh,
that as
that's
well.
beautiful.
Thank you. So I had a workshop recently in the UK prior to coming. I'm in the States right now.
Mhm.
But I've started doing in-person workshops because, we're in post-COVID times, so it's fun.
Yeah, that's fun. Yeah.
Isn't it? It's just fun. And so this was a photo shoot at that location. So now I don't know if you're following along. I've brought both the images into the same scene. And I was curious to see if we could generative fill them together.
Oh, interesting.
Right? So, okay. So I thought this could be like something we could do together. Um, I don't know. So if you're watching and following and still following along, then in the comments, feel free to like share if you think this should be like side by side or if I should leave a little gap. I think for now I'm just going to follow my intuition and leave a tiny wee little gap. And now we've got these two pictures side to side, blank layer. I'm going to add a generative. We're just going to select the middle. And in the generative fill, you can go ahead and what do you call it? Say something like blend together,
Mm.
or leave it empty. Let's see what happens if we just hit generate. And the reason I thought this would be quite fun is because on Instagram you can add multiple images. So
Right.
say for example you're shooting in a studio or you want to blend one image into the other, into another, and you like want to create like a longer scene, you could literally use generative fill to like bridge between the pictures. And that's
Oh.
like, yeah, so this did not do the best job. So we're gonna take that out.
It just made a bar.
Just made a bar. I'm gonna take out the prompt and see what it like naturally wants to do. Because I feel like sometimes if you give it too much information, it's trying really hard to please you.
Yeah.
Um, okay.
So it just extended the photo on the
It
left, it looks like.
Yeah, that's literally what it looks like. So, but actually, did it try to blend in the plants? If I turn this
Yeah,
off and on, sort of. Let's try one more time because it is like fun
it's
to
trying.
see. It's trying. Maybe I'll pick a bigger select as well. Like
Yeah.
maybe that was too narrow. And just go to like generate. And then we can also go to like merge. Merge might be quite interesting as well. Um, so yeah, this is really fun as well because this is just like playful ways you can use generative build in like unexpected ways.
Mhm.
So okay,
Oh, okay. Now, okay, yeah, I see
it
it. And
did
now it
need
looks like a little tower.
okay. So you see what I was trying to
Yeah,
say? Like it blends the scene from one into the other.
that's
And so
really cool.
isn't it? So what you would be doing in like I don't even know if I would have had this idea before. Clearly I hadn't, otherwise I probably would have explored it. Um, but Generative allowed me to like blend the scene. And it's so fun. So it just like wrapped it around. And the funny thing is this
Yeah,
building is actually a tower.
right.
It is a rotund building. It extended yeah, we can see it perfectly. Now imagine that scene after scene after scene. And then you're on Instagram and then like taking someone through a storybook of like
Yeah,
imagery.
that's such a
So
cool idea.
yes, I wish I could claim it was my own, but no, my clever husband was like, what happens if we put them side by side? So um so yeah, we were sort of messing around yesterday to just see like what we could do. And here we go. If you see this on my Instagram popping up now, you will know you saw it here first,
Yes,
how the
exactly.
idea was born. Um, oh, and then I think something I didn't mention was, oh, here we go. So I'll go back to this image only because it's smaller and hopefully, we can keep track.
Sadly, it is just about time to leave. I think
Ah,
I know we're just about out of time, so I don't think
okay.
we'll have enough time to show anything else.
Oh, the only thing I
But
wanted to show was
yeah, go ahead.
for anybody, this is like 1 second. If you are cropping an image big or small, the crop tool has, if you right click, generative fill in there. Uh,
Oh.
Yes, I think it showed up on this one, like crop is selected. And ooh, okay, maybe not. I thought I saw it though. I do believe there is like generative fill in the crop. So there, see, you can expand it.
Mm,
Yeah.
very cool.
So that's another thing that is very useful to know about generative fill.
All right. Well, thank you
Great.
so much for joining us today, Bella. We really appreciate it. Your work is absolutely incredible. Don't forget to follow Bella on Instagram. Yeah, we're stick around. Actually, stick around for the File News Show with Ryan Selby coming up next. If you'd like to hear some articles and news about the goings on in the art industry. Yeah, thank you all so much for joining us. Stick around, guys. Bye.